I was always told that you should start these things with a joke, but I was also always told that sometimes truth is much funnier than fiction. So this is an absolutely true story. I was having a conversation with one of the delegates about my surprise at how many roof-orientated sort of, if you like, not only speakers but also exhibitors there were. As in given that this is a large-scale conference. And he said, and this is not a word of a lie, it's not about size, it's where you put it. So I'll start with that and let you think about that one. The first thing I have to say is what a difference a year makes. I looked at because we sponsored this last year as well, albeit it was interesting timing given that they'd just announced the fit review and all of the changes. And I watched the video from it the other day just to sort of remind myself the world that we were in just 12 short months ago. And I have to say that the positivity that we now have compared to last month last year is palatable beyond belief would be an understatement. Basically we're now in a position, guys, where we've actually won. We are actually now officially part of the energy mix. The needle might not be moving yet, but it's definitely starting to move. And the individuals in this room, some more so than others because there's some new people in the room, but the individuals in this room are the ones that are responsible for that. And I think, we've got to be amazingly proud of that fact and never forget that fact. We haven't had it easy. There's been some, let's say, external pressures put on us. I'll remind you of a few, not in any particular order, but we've had the repeated cuts, whether it's FIT or ROC or, sort of the moving from one to the other. We've had Eric Pickles, you gotta love Eric. MIP, where the European government or European community basically allow us to pay more to the Chinese for the privilege of buying cheap kit. I'm not quite, never did understand that one. We have an aging grid, like a lot of the rest of Europe. We have an aging grid that clearly wasn't built with the sort of installations that we are putting on them in mind. And then we've had the CFDs and being put into CFDs early and obviously pitted against a much more mature technology of wind. However, with all of that as a backdrop, we've managed to win. What an amazing result. I mean, I know it's unofficial at this point and DEC will eventually get there probably 12 months late, but 8 gigawatts or thereabouts is what we've achieved in just 4 short years. That's an incredible result for a country that, certainly when I was walking here this morning, I realized is not the sunniest country in the world, but an absolutely fantastic result and sort of well done to everyone in this room. There was a think tank put together in 2000, and it was asked the question, this is moving on to worldwide, it was asked the question, and these were all the sort of smart people, much more intelligent than me, certainly. They were asked the question, how many megawatts of solar would be deployed by 2013? And not only did they get it wrong, they got it wrong by a factor of 62. So there is 62 times more solar in the world today than the best brains that we had in the year 2000 could estimate. And that's an illustration of what we, as a small part of a larger global industry, is achieving. 177 gigawatts in the world at the end of 2014. 38 gigawatts of which were put in just the last 12 months. A 20% increase in the last 12 months. That's an unbelievable figure for an industry. And it's not only about moving the dial, it's about making sure that that dial continues to, if you like, not only start moving, but ultimately start taking on the other incumbents. There are now 20 countries that have over a gigawatt of solar. There's also one company that's got a gigawatt of solar in one country. I had to say something about Lightsource, clearly. But 20 countries with a gigawatt of solar, that's an amazing result. So this is not just us doing stuff. This is the whole world embracing all of the positives of solar and making sure that we push the technology forward. I'm going to attempt to... So, by 2025, I'm not big on slides, but I'll give you a few. By 2025, solar is going to be the cheapest energy source or electricity source. I mean, so not only are we going well, but we're basically on the trajectory to continue to go well and basically take on the rest. And then they reckon, if I can get this to work, that by 2050, we'll be the largest form of energy generation globally. We are in the right industry. We're at the vanguard of an amazing sea change in energy generation. And, we are the ones that, if you like, have started the ball rolling. But I think it continues to become an avalanche as time goes on. However, the fight continues. We have interesting challenges, whether it's climate. Apparently, this is not funny, but well, it is funny. Apparently, otherwise I wouldn't be laughing. Apparently, the Pope has put together a think tank, and the think tank is basically going to advise him, and the Pope is going to come out with his decision on what his attitude to energy changes or to climate changes. So if the Pope's getting on the bandwagon, boys, we're all going in the right direction. In terms of pricing, Citigroup have said that in the US they reckon that solar is able to be subsidy free, whatever that means, by 2020. And one of the things I think is another one is jobs. There are renewable energy jobs are growing at 10 times the pace of fossil fuels, and in America there are more individuals employed in the solar industry than there are in the coal industry. These are big statements. 10 years ago you would have laughed at that statement. Another interesting one, because I always think that sort of bringing it home is very useful. And we were lucky enough to win a CFD, like sort of 79.23p, or yeah, 79 pounds. Just think about that. In 2011, we installed megawatts, exactly the same sort of megawatts as we're installing, at 79 pounds, but we got 33 pence. It was for 25 years, and it was index linked at RPI, plus we got to sell the electricity on top. We've just won a CFD, which means it must work financially, at 7.9 pence for 15 years, indexed with CPI. I mean, oh my God, if that's not a classic example of where we've come to, or where we started and where we've got to in just 4 short years, I don't know what is. The other thing I think is important, we've got to remember that investments and investors and funds, etc., are the lifeblood of this business. And without bringing them with us, we're not going to get anywhere. But it's already started. They are either divesting or certainly not reinvesting in fossil fuels. They're investing in renewables. There's a new regulation that, if it comes into play, will mean, basically what it says is that in order to cap and collar CO2 emissions, that 450 parts per million is this cap. And if they bring in that rule, that means that the majority of the oil companies will not be able to pump the oil reserves that they have in the ground out of the ground because of the fact that their emissions will bring it over that number, which is an incredible positive for us, and from an investor perspective, obviously something that hasn't been lost on them. And in terms of coal, the value of coal companies in the last 5 years has reduced by 75%. So 75% reduction in overall value of companies that are taking coal out of the ground. This is not just happening on the ground, this is happening from a macro level as well. In terms of solar and the part solar is playing, this is how solar is seen to grow between now and 2030. It becomes the dominant player. And again, we're perfectly positioned for that. Again, to keep kicking at the fossil fuel industry, 91% of the world's CO2 emissions come from burning of fossil fuels and cement generation. 91%. The rest is probably from cattle doing what cattle do whenever they eat grass, but I'll leave that one with you. 50% is pumped into the atmosphere, 26% into the land, and 24% into the oceans. 21 billion tons of CO2 is pumped into the atmosphere every year, and only half of that is able to be broken down by natural means, plants and the like. So what's happening to the other half? 10.5 million tons of this stuff that we're not processing. Again, none of it good news. There's all this talk about, ground mount is dead. I don't buy that. I absolutely don't buy it. I think that certainly the Conservative government has copped on to the fact that there is definitely something positive about solar adding to the energy mix. Don't stick it where you shouldn't put it. Use sensible, position it properly. If we only positioned it on sort of low-grade agricultural or worse land, we would still be able to contribute many, many gigawatts. It's got to be positioned sensibly. It can't be, in the line of view of a load of different, villagers and town folk. You've got to put it in the right position, but in the right place. I think it adds a massive value, to the energy mix. And I think the other thing that we've got to try and strive for is true grid parity. I talk about the amount of CO2 that's pumped into the atmosphere. I talk about Hinkley Point and the fact that for generations we're going to be tidying up all of that depleted uranium. We're in a situation where we don't take account, or we don't get the positive of all of the fact that we are clean and we don't leave a mess for generations to come. True grid parity should be factoring in the cost of all of that tidied up. In terms of optimization, I know I'm going. Optimization is absolutely key. I mean, whenever we were building our first sites, we used to build 1-for-1 panels to inverters. We're now in a situation where we're building 1 to 1.3. So again, all of these things, we need to sort of get more sensible in the way that we work. Smart homes is massively potential, or has massive potential. It's such an exciting thing, but not just to put PV on a roof. It's about put PV on the roof, put battery, and control the entire home. That's massive growth for us. Batteries and solar make excellent bedfellows. If the government came along to me, I love this sort of Hinkley Point, why are we paying so much for it? Answer equals because it's base load. If the government paid me £95 for 35 years, index linked, I would give them as much baseload electricity as they wanted, because solar and battery allows us to do that. And we've got to start making these points a little bit louder. I would rather have solar up and down the country than a Hinkley Point. Moving back to the UK, the projections this year are for the summer peak is at 37.5 gigawatts, which is the lowest for many, many years. Solar is starting to make a difference because it's starting to contribute to the peak load in the middle of summer. That's massively valuable, and that will continue. I think I've got another slide. I could. Right, I'm getting told off. Okay, basically, look, batteries, I'm just sort of showing you there the trajectory of batteries. Look, for the first time ever, I don't feel like an unwelcome guest at the party. We're in a situation where solar actually is part of the energy mix, and the government are actually talking to us rather than saying, oh, here comes those annoying solar people again. I think that the reason for that is the individuals in this room. I think that solar will, in fact, I think solar has survived and will only go in one direction, and I look forward to the fight. Thank you very much.